yeah.
Yeah, okay. In that case, I would move maybe passed or approved.
Okay, second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Alrighty. First news is Chris Clayback has resigned from the planning commission. And well, you guys knew that because he contacted you. And so that is why we won't have 5 tonight. I hope we will have 4. And that's the first news. The first action besides the approval of minutes is the warning or the moving ahead on the 29 ordinance items. And I might look for some assistance from Elias on this, but I believe what we want to do, it's our opinion, and correct me if you don't agree, Thomas and Leslie. I believe we already sent forward appropriately number 29. Is that right?
I believe we did.
We did.
Yeah.
So here's how Peter and I talked about it with Scott. And so we're gonna take the 24 that were approved, have to go to the select board. And then we could decide whether the 4 or the 5 remaining, you haven't come to a consensus on the RV issue. So we're either gonna split those into 4 and 1, or if you come to a consensus, we can take all 5 and package those as well, but they have to be separate. The select board did pull out those 5.
So it's really 24 that we are approving now, plus we already approved 1, which was number 29, right?
Yes,
Yep. And we want to talk about the RVs and then decide what we're going to do with the other 3. Right?
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to start by talking about the RV proposal that had been done by Leon? I wish he was here, but
Just a little bit.
yes, sir. I had a comment, I had a concern about the amount of time that one can park a vehicle like this on their property before it becomes an annoyance to your neighbor. And I was wondering what the thoughts were from other board members and if anybody from the audience wants to talk about that.
I'd actually like clarification on number 29 that you mentioned. You approved it previously. And by that, what do you mean? You mean you're warning it for a public hearing, or?
We thought we already did it, Mike.
I didn't see any warning for number 29 separately in the newspaper.
I believe it's history, isn't it? Didn't we already deal with that quite a while ago?
Let me tell you what I understand history to be and tell me if I'm wrong. The commission had 29 proposals, which it pulled 1, which was number 6, I believe, prior to the select board's hearing. So there were only 28 actually before the select board for approval. Excuse me, it was number 5 that was struck by the planning commission. Administrative approval of multi-unit residential developments. Okay,
Yep.
so the select board had the remaining 28, which were 1 through 29 minus number 5 for them. They rejected 5 of them. They sent it back to you, the planning commission, and this is apparently where the confusion begins, because my reading of the statute says that they send it back to you to change your report to conform to the action taken by the select board. So that means the report needed to be amended to show 1 through 24 that were approved by the select board. Then the select board has one more final hearing, after which they can adopt the 24. In the meantime, the planning commission voted to send all 29 back to the select board. I'm not sure what happened to number 5 in the meantime, but sent them all back. And I believe that was beyond their authority at that point. I sent a email to the chairman of the select board. I didn't get a response, but from what I heard at the select board meeting, it seemed that he agreed with that proposition. I then heard at that select board meeting or a subsequent one that the planning commission was going to come back with the 24 that they had already approved and then bring 5 more, which were the ones that they had rejected the first time, as a new proposal. So I understood that you would do your administrative thing of changing the report on the 24, and then you were going to start anew with 5, which would be warned for a public hearing here and warned for a public hearing before the select board. So tell me where we drop off.
I was under the impression that we were warning 24 of them.
On the 26th of February was a public hearing held to discuss and vote on the remaining 5. So that's where you may have
Okay, 26th of February.
26th of February. That was a warned public hearing.
When you say a warned public hearing, you mean warned in the newspaper?
Yes, sir.
With the planning commission or
For the planning commission. To address those 5. Because they were modified.
Yeah, I guess I don't have those
I could furnish those to you.
Okay. So in your mind, you're done with it?
You know, we have a vote tonight on what we've warned for today, correct?
What we're doing is separating at this meeting, the 24 from the 5. It was at the last meeting we had, you raised an objection that you didn't think that they should be done together. So tonight, we will separate the 29 out to be 24 and 5.
So I can speak to number 29 in the context of those 24?
I personally was under the impression that we dealt with 29 a long time ago.
We took a vote, it
First,
was unanimous to approve 29. That's correct.
And I might add that we voted that same night to pull 29 from the group.
And voted on it individually.
We voted on that individually and we all agreed to send that back to the select board by itself.
And I would like to point out that before any of you guys were here, last year when Phil was chair, we actually voted on the exact same thing and sent it to the select board then.
Are you just 29?
What's that?
No,
Just 29?
Just 29 for the,
No.
that's just the parking lot one, right? With the,
No,
no, which one is 29? I'm sorry.
It's the parcel behind Palmer House.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Parking lot.
Mixed use.
It's half parking lots, Palmer half and half of it's.
mixed use 1, mixed use 2.
We sent that back last year. We voted on it. The old planning commission voted on it with Phil as chair, and we sent it to the select board then to be approved. And then it was never approved, so we included it in our list. And then it was sent back again. We decided to send it back individually, and now it's back to us again for another vote.
Well, so is it back to you or is it not? That's what,
I believe we've already approved it, Mike.
but you're going to vote it as part of the,
It has been said.
No, I believe what we're voting on today is 1 through 24.
1 through 24 from the original report.
Clarification from Peter,
Beg pardon?
we're voting tonight on 1 through 24.
1 through 24 can be voted on tonight.
Right.
There was some discussion for an item on there reference to RVs
Yes.
and whether you choose to move that forward at this point in time is,
29 is a done deal. Number 29 is.
well, yeah, you could
Yes,
say
that's
that.
fine.
So what happened to 4, 5, 6, 8, 14?
Those are still to be dealt with, I believe.
Say 1 through 24, so I'm confused.
We removed 5
You have the
that
list.
were not approved by the select board.
I do have, do you want to
and
look
we are
at it?
gonna Deal with those separately.
So is it 1 through 29 less certain numbers?
Less 5 of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what ought to be done by.
Now it's just
Want
20.
that? Right.
The ones that were pulled out are, I'm just gonna give you numbers. But 4 having to do with accessory apartment,
Right?
6 language added to allow 10 feet, et cetera. 8 residential treatment facility. 14 language revised to clarify, this is the RV
Camper.
camper that we're still dealing with. And 29, which is the certain parcels being rezoned from mixed use 2 to mixed use 1 behind the old town. That one, we pulled out people from Tim Reese was here and Palmer House was represented, and we pulled that one out. We voted on it to maintain that change and sent it back.
I don't want to be out of order, but I guess I'm asking for a little leeway to explain to you why I don't think 29 does what you think it does.
Go ahead, but could you be succinct? Because we have a lot of things to cover in an hour and a half.
I'd be glad to. There's 2 basic reasons. When the former chair spoke before the select board, after some other folks and myself had objected to 29, he said that there was a misunderstanding that I had suggested that there was no protection for the historic structures on the Reese parcel. And he said, no, that was the impetus for the change, was to protect those structures. That was one. Number 2, second point, was the Palmer House, the expansion on the northern end to include the Palmer House so that their restaurant would be able to be open to the public. The problems are twofold. On the first problem, it is not the underlying zoning district, MU1 versus MU2, that protects a historic structure. It is its inclusion, or in the case of the Reese parcel, non-inclusion in the historic district. It's the historic district that needs to be changed in order to provide protection for historic structures found in the bylaw as now written. And that's in section 5.1 on page 63, I believe it is, of the proposed bylaw. Secondly, as to the Palmer House restaurant, the Palmer House restaurant is not in the area that was changed from MU2 to MU1. It's further back from that. It's about 3 times further back than the width of the zone. Have this map that got from Peter the other day. This just barely shows the northern extent of the district, but it stops right at this building which fronts on Main Street. And the restaurant is back in this building, back here.
I think what he's referring to is a standalone restaurant was extended to the mixed use 2 district as a conditional use in conjunction with lodging use. So what they're saying is they're allowing that conditional use in that very same district, MU2.
So you're not changing the district line here, the
We're
underline?
changing this district, but we're not changing it back as far as the restaurant.
What's the purpose of changing it here?
Tim Reese, his property is,
It's over here.
half of it is in U1, half of it's in MU2.
So he's told,
He's sharing, his property is split, and he wants his property to be just one continuous zone rather than split into 2 zones.
I listened to that meeting where he told you that. And I then went to the town clerk and I looked at the survey plat for his property. And I looked at the zoning map, which clearly follows the property line of the Ye Olde Tavern. His property is not split by the zoning line. And you can actually see that. I left it up there with you.
This one,
Yeah.
that one here.
This follows his property line. You can see the parking lot underneath there and where it continues across his line. But that's not in the MU1 currently.
Okay, so what you're saying, Mike, if I can put words in your mouth, is you think we made a mistake in this dealing with number 29?
I do.
Okay. Then I think that should be something that's brought not to here, but to the town zoning office.
Well, why the zoning officer? He doesn't adopt the bylaw.
Yeah, but we're not gonna change it. It's the select board that's gonna change it, and they're gonna change it based on what you present to him as your position, I believe. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure I can.
Frame is, this was last before the select board in November.
Mhm.
We're now 6 months later. I'm trying to obviate the need for going through another 6-month loop here to say, if you're trying to do what you're saying, you're missing.
Okay, but you've taken a lot of time to investigate this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should be given.
As should the planning commission before it proposes something.
I think we should have the time to look at it and see if there was a mistake made and whether it needs to be changed.
That's fine.
Alrighty, we'll do that. Okay? Agreed?
Can I just ask a relatively quick question? Mike, I don't think that I understand what your concern is with
My concern
this
is,
change.
okay, I'm opposed to the change of that parcel to MU1.
Okay,
It's a gerrymandering. All the other lines follow property lines. And he's using his property line that extends far into the MU2. It will become this peninsula out of proportion in size and shape to the rest of the MU1.
okay,
The purpose of the MU1, if you read in the plan and in the bylaw, is to provide opportunities for pedestrian-oriented businesses. That will never be a site for pedestrian-oriented businesses because it only has a right-of-way 25 feet wide. It's barely enough for 2 cars to pass. Talk nothing about pedestrian. So it's an attempt by Mr. Reese to upgrade the zoning.
Is it right?
It's Rice.
Well, that's how he pronounced it. It's an attempt by the owner of the parcel to upgrade the zoning of his parcel to an
Okay,
extent that's out of proportion for anything around there.
okay,
And in terms of, there are two large parcels that are currently in the MU2. One is the Palmer House, one is the Rice parcel. If you were choosing which one should be changed to MU1, the one that's far more accessible by pedestrians is the Palmer House. It has pedestrian access now, and it has room to expand that pedestrian access. The Rice parcel is a back lot.
Well, we are looking at it and I'm looking at the map here. It looks like his only access to the main road is through the Palmer House parking lot.
that way.
and it's my understanding that he
Well, that's not
owns
what it
part
is.
of the parking lot.
Say it again, Thomas.
My understanding from him is that he owns part of that parking lot as well,
That's what he said.
and I have no reason to not believe him.
Well, look
But
at.
he may not own both forever. And so if this zoning change is granted, his parcel that you're thinking of changing or have changed, depending on how you look at things, is totally separate from the Palmer House. He's free to disassociate those two completely and no longer use ingress and egress from the Palmer House property, as would be his successors. And this also has huge impacts on another adjoiner, Zion Episcopal Church, of which I am a parishioner.
So is that
Pedestrian
the
traffic.
concern that the church, is that the church has a concern?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't represent the church, but I'm a parishioner.
Is there someone here that does represent the church that has a public concern with number 29 and our approval of it?
I'm here as the representative of the church. And so I think from our point of view, that without a sufficient way to get back to that property, that pedestrian traffic and would increase across our property. We don't know that, but that's a concern that we would have. Because it appears that the only way to get back to that property is between the old Yield Tavern and the parts store. There's a road there. I guess it's called Palmer Road or
Palmer Place.
Place, but it's not wide enough to have two cars to go back through it, and then to create sidewalks and other issues for pedestrians to get back into that piece of property all at the same time. It's too narrow. So that would be our concern from the church's point of view, is that we would become a walk through for anything that gets developed back there. So that's what I'm saying.
As well as impacts, as a Manchester resident and a parishioner and contributor to Zion Church, as well as other impacts on the Zion property, including relative to the property's value. Now, I don't think Zion Church is planning on selling the property anytime soon, but that doesn't change the fact that Zion is a property owner and has rights to have its value protected against changes in zoning laws that would allow adjoiners to do all kinds of things on the adjoining parcel, which could affect security on Zion's parcel, which could affect the church actually being dwarfed by future commercial enterprises on the Rice property. We're not talking about what Mr. Rice wants to do with the property. We're talking about what he'll be able to do with the property. His property value will skyrocket. Zion's property value will pay the price of that increase in his value, and whether he takes full advantage of the zoning change or his successor in interest does, someone eventually will. How often does property sit at less than its highest and best use? And so whether it's he who decides to make those changes or sell the property at its newly enhanced value to a developer who comes in and puts the property to its highest and best use, or his executor down the road, or creditors, in the event of a lawsuit or a divorce or bankruptcy or anything else, any future landowner, if I were the landowner of that parcel, I would do all kinds of things on it above and beyond what Mr. Rice currently has.
Can I stop you? This is a very good presentation, but I think we have to move along, and I want to make a commitment that we will address this in a timely fashion. Are you representing the Zion Church, Mike?
I'm representing myself.
Okay. Well, it would be greatly helpful if you might put a one-pager together as to what exactly your contention is, and the same with the Zion Church, a one-pager, so we understand exactly what you're saying, and then,
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, this is not a one-pager.
fine, then do it with more than that if you want. Keep it concise. I was trying not to put a great deal of burden on you, but it would be helpful to have an explanation of your position so we can make sure we're responding to it correctly. I think you've stated a good point here, and I don't want to dismiss it at all. I want to say that we will address it and do it in a timely fashion.
And I would like to just point out to Leon,
How much
that
development could be?
right away to the Rice parcel is not through the Old Tavern. It's around the Old
No,
Tavern.
could just-
Between the church and the tavern?
No,
Is it-
between the tavern and the.
I think it was very big.
Palmer Place.
Okay.
In fact, it tucks so closely around that right-hand rear corner of the Old Tavern's barn that any pedestrian walking back there would be in the lane of oncoming traffic. It's.
It makes a right hand. The right of way touches 4 separate parts.
Just poor, that's poor planning. That was poor planning originally,
I,
it sounds like.
actually, I just, because I'm relatively new, I just asked Peter and Elias about the size of the property and the extent to which development could just be done by the owner if he wanted to, which is what I'm hearing you say.
The owner's in violation right now.
All right, Mike, just give me a minute. And I would like Peter just to tell everybody what he just told me about what would be required and, yeah.
Any further development would require him to come to, a conditional would require a development review board approval.
Right, but he'd be
Not that
requesting,
these amendments are.
he'd be requesting a permit for a permitted use. Categorically.
Categorically for a permitted use.
Isn't that relatively
And that.
not all that difficult to get once?
Depends on what you want to do there. Of course, I don't have a chapter and verse, what's allowed conditional versus permittable. So,
There's a retail
Very
use,
slippery slope.
yes,
there's a retail use on the property that's not permitted in MU2. It is permitted in MU1, and apparently the attitude has been, well, that may change, so we go
I'm
along.
going to repeat myself and say that we will look at this in a very timely fashion, Mike. And I think it's probably worthwhile, in my opinion, and I don't know whether you've got a history of it, to look at it on site. But I appreciate what your comments are and we will directly deal with it.
I appreciate that very much.
Righty?
but just a quick question. In terms of notification, were you notified of any changes to the zoning prior to coming here tonight? In other words, did you know this was ongoing?
They were notified by me.
Right.
So you did not receive a letter of notification?
No.
Okay.
It's my understanding that, having conversations with the Yield Tavern and the parts store, that they did not receive, notification either. So, that's true or not.
How's that possible?
It's done by regular mail. I mean,
Yeah, nobody got
I beg pardon?
it. But if none of the adjoiners got
Which I find curious.
All righty, we're going to move on, but you've gotten a commitment from me that we're going to deal with this quickly. And probably get back to you to look at it, okay?
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All righty. Let's move on to Leon's favorite topic, campers and
Oh, that
RVs.
one, okay. Campers and RVs. We were prepared for it.
You want that?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So, did anybody else get a copy of this, or is it just the one we have?
That's the one I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks.
you guys have.
I can make copies quick of it.
So, hers is cleaner. This one has the markings on it. So I think they select board had sent back to us number, what was it, number 6, no, which one was it? 14.
14 is
So
correct. Yes.
language revised to clarify that an RV or camper can function as a temporary shelter. I think we were making the language to make it a temporary shelter based upon the fact that we have no language at all around RVs, but also because if somebody is already staying here 6 months out of the year with their camper, we don't want to say, oh, you can't do that anymore. So we don't want that language either. We want to allow them to continue what they're doing as long as what language we want to put in place is to keep it sanitation around it, keep it from being parked in people's front yards, on city streets, or hooked up to, just a pipe running out to creek. We don't want that. We want to make sure it's running to if it's going to be long-term, it's going to a septic tank in some way. So what we had come up, this is like almost 2 years ago now. What I had written was the maximum stay in an RV at a single location for a transient guest is 180 days during any rolling 12-month period, which means they can come in anytime during the year. And it starts from that point to arrive.
Can we should we address it as we go down, or do you want to do the whole thing?
I was just gonna read it all out and then we can
Okay.
address it. So see if it makes sense this way. The recreational vehicles may be used for temporary living or sleeping purposes on private property within the town for up to 6 months or 180 consecutive days, provided that the property owner meets all applicable health and safety requirements with regards to sanitation. RV parking. No person shall park a recreational vehicle on any public street or alley in the town for more than 24 hours within any 7-day period. Recreational vehicles may be parked in a driveway for up to 14 days, but must not block sidewalks or extend into the street or public right-of-way. No more than one recreational vehicle, camper, trailer, truck camper, motorhome, shall be parked on an owner's property at any time unless a temporary permit has been acquired. Recreational vehicles shall be stored in the rear yard or side of the residence, but no closer than 5 feet to any abutting property line. They may not be parked in front of the residence for more than 14 days. And then there's just some definitions of
I'm confused. Can you say parking to the side, and now I'm hearing it can't be parked in front of the residence for more than 14?
more than 14 days, and if otherwise, as he parked on the side of the house or in the rear of the home.
Why should be parked in front of all?
Well, if you're
some
coming back from a trip or something.
Yeah,
sometimes you're on boat.
vacation, you're pulling in, unloading your stuff into your garage, you want to pull it up to your driveway, you should be allowed to park it for a period of time, but not a long period of time.
I think what we've tried to do, or what Leon has tried to do here, is to provide some wiggle room for people who are using those vehicles and need time temporarily to do whatever they have to do. That's really what it is.
Comments on it?
I think the only, sorry,
Go ahead.
I think you had mentioned before that and I don't want to speak for you, but you had mentioned the up to 6 months, that was potentially a concern, that maybe that's too much.
That
I
is
don't-
what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. I think the only thing, and I think I had mentioned this last time, is that having some sort of, I think we should look at a flat out restriction on certain districts
Yeah, we
altogether as well. So I think those are the only two things that I have a concern.
What do others on this board and what do people in the out here say about the 180 days? Is it too much?
Well, I guess I look at it from a little broader perspective. All our zoning bylaws have density requirements in the zones. You have to meet certain lot standards and so on. And you have to meet, septic issues and parking requirements. And this seems to be another subterfuge to avoid our basic zoning bylaws. And, you live in a zone now where this isn't permitted, and all of a sudden neighborhoods are gonna have these pop-up part-time residences. And then also, what keeps them from an owner living in them and then renting out their house, for an STR. So I think you gotta be very careful about doing these, I call them, backdoor subterfuges to our basic zoning bylaws.
I agree with you, Bill. I wouldn't want to redo a beautiful house between, say, the bank and Bonnet and School Street on Bonnet Street, and then have a neighbor pull up an RV and park it for half a year there. We're asking our residents to do a good job, and we have restrictions on what they can do, and it's got to meet certain criteria, and this flies in the face of it.
Yes, I agree.
So,
I have a
And
question.
the other part is, it's concerning, what RVs are like, who monitors that,
We have
the
them.
health piece and septic, that piece is all properly dealt with for a 6-month period of time. There's locations for those vehicles, they're in RV parks, and they have the systems all set up to deal with, the effluent and, all those issues.
Well, I believe I have neighbors that their father-in-law comes in for half a year. He stays in a camper that's parked on the side of their home. And it's a nice camper, and they have a pipe going down into their septic, so it is connected. And for us to say, oh, that's not allowed anymore, just flat out not allowed, it would, break up their family in a sense, because their home is too small for him to stay inside the home. So it's sort of they get to see grandpa part of the year because of that. And I would hate to say no to that. And it doesn't look bad. It's on the side of the house. It's not parked in the front yard or parked in the street. But I do see where you're coming from, Bill.
I think I'd like to look at where other towns' ordinances look like relative to this issue. I'm concerned about the septic situation, and I'm concerned about the 180 days. And maybe we can take a look at how it's dealt with in other towns.
I mean, even if he is hooking up to a pipe into the ground, is this a septic system permitted for that?
How did this come?
It's town sewer.
Or town sewer, yeah, but then does he have the proper allocation from the town for that?
I don't know. I think they just,
Can I ask a question,
Yeah.
please? Because I said I've only been to 3 meetings. How did this come up in the first place?
Janet assigned, we were coming up with things we didn't have in the books. And she said, we need something about RVs. There's nothing about RVs.
Okay,
And she-
so we
and she-
had
and-
them.
And she said, who wants to take on this? And I said, well, I have a camper in my yard. I'll take this on. And it wasn't because wasn't to benefit myself. Honestly, I tried to sell my camper 3 years ago. My wife lost the keys, so I can't sell it. Find the keys, I'll sell it. But I grew up in Florida originally, and a lot of campers, a lot of RVs, people coming down part of the year, going back. And so I've seen this, and I honestly get a lot of these various rules from towns in Florida that have rules around RVs to keep it sightly and to keep it clean. I did say in here, as long as they meet applicable health and safety requirements in regards to sanitation. And the idea is that, they should be hooked up to something if they're going to be staying in it for a period of time.
If that goes through, I think that needs to be written up in a lot more detail.
I would think that there's going to be more restrictions and criteria relative to the sewer connection than is on here.
Oh, yeah. This is basic starting point.
Right. So it would be my recommendation that we take a little look at this. Yes.
You have a raised hand on Zoom. Brian.
Brian Maggiato, Bill's comments on sewer or septic, you have to be consistent with every discussion you have. If somebody is hooking up to town water, they need a wastewater permit that allows it. If they have a septic that is set in for 3 bedrooms and you add a 4th, they are out of compliance. You know, this will tie into every housing conversation you have moving forward. You have to be consistent from the beginning.
Who was that?
This is Brian Maggiato.
Brian, I think that's correct. That we will take that into account as we look at trying to revise this ordinance.
Thank you.
Of course, the irony is the guy already has.
Everyone,
His name.
because we have nothing
It's already
restricted.
Been doing this for years, apparently.
And so we have to
And
create,
until it was decided to somehow, I can't think of the word I want, but to somehow regulate that. It
there's no
hasn't been a
irony.
problem as far as at least I've only been here 10 years. So, you know, I'm a newbie, I'm a flatlander, right?
You don't know that it
But-
hasn't been a problem, first of all, and it's, what you're
think I
saying is we should
would've-
ignore this situation
No.
that is non-compliant.
I'm not, but I think that we may be going overboard in terms of feeling that we need to regulate this up the wazoo. I think,
The comments that were made by Brian are absolutely correct, in my opinion.
You're going to open yourselves up to litigation down the road when it comes to health and safety, when it comes to environmental regulation. You want to talk about short-term rentals down the road. If you say it doesn't matter how many RVs I hook up to a septic, then I might as well have somebody put 25 people in a 2-bedroom house and let them continue to just pack and flow into all of our infrastructure. These are all the same conversations.
that is not what I'm saying, Brian.
Well, you just said to ignore it.
Jonathan?
So the regulations, I believe, based on the fact that we actually had to go through this for permitting purposes on our own property, the wastewater rules, at least for non-town, I'm talking about a septic system on your property, is mandated by state rules, right? And are approved for a certain amount of flow based on the amount of bedrooms that are available and the type of use that it is seen as. So a RV has a different type of, it is not considered, so if you have a 3-bedroom house and you have an RV that has 1 bedroom in that RV, that's not considered an equal 4th bedroom. So to speak. There are different regulations that the state sees in the approval of that plan. I know because that's what we actually were approved for, was the ability to have an appropriate amount of flow on our property into the septic system for an RV, so we can park it on our property, and use it for, you know, a kid's birthday party or something like that. And then also have, you know, enough sewer coverage, but that was all done on a state permitting level, not a town.
And Jonathan, that's for temporary use, not for 6 months, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, and that is a big difference.
But the flow was determined as, you know, as Leon was saying, you know, the regulations say you can't have it more than 6 months. That's not a permanent use. That is a 6-month temporary usage, which means the flow that is required for that amount of usage is less than a regular bedroom. And that's mandated by rules of the state of Vermont.
How do they describe temporary usage in that particular permitting situation?
I don't recall exactly, but it's not full-time, meaning like you're not gonna have a body living in there 365 days. And it's not 364, that doesn't make it temporary. You know, a seasonal use.
I understand your point. I think we need to look into this a little bit more, make sure we understand what the implications are from sewer and water, especially sewer. And we have a somewhat sensitive sewer system in this town, in my opinion. And I don't think we should just barge ahead and say that this is okay. But what do you all think?
I just want to ask, and I think I asked this last time, right now, anyone can park an RV anywhere in town with no restrictions, correct?
I think that's a very good point, Thomas, as to where it should be zone wise. My personal opinion, anyway. I don't know what.
Well, and I also say that based on some of the details within this proposal. So if I want to park any type of RV anywhere within the limits of Manchester, there is nothing stopping me or anyone else from doing anything, maybe with the exception of the rec park,
No.
in terms of overnight. Am I correct or incorrect?
I think you can park it anywhere, but when you start using it as another residence, that's a change of use as defined in the zoning bylaw.
That's an interesting perspective.
That's correct. You can park them, you cannot habitate or hook them up.
That's a different.
Two different issues.
Well, I mean, there are also some campers or RVs that can function by themselves.
For a while. Right.
There are some that can function for months,
Well,
if not.
it's not a question of how they can function. It's a question of how you're using the land.
Yes. So I propose that we take a little bit more time to work on this, if others agree. And I'm not trying to diminish the
that's
work
fine.
that you've
No,
done.
no, I haven't really done a lot. It's just basic.
You all agree with that?
Well,
If
Yes.
you're not going to address, there is the issue of transient RVs parking in parking lots because they can self-contain for a day or two overnight. I mean, that's part of the traveling culture, my understanding. And as Thomas was addressing, do we at least want to limit overnight parking anywhere other than a legitimate location?
Well, most parking lots are private property, so we couldn't, like, if you wanted to park one of your friends in Charlie's overnight, we couldn't say no because it's your property. But on Bonnet Street in a public parking
For
space,
residents, I mean, to reside in.
I mean,
a distinction just between parking and
So as
overnight residents.
Mike pointed out, there has to be a different,
Table.
there has to be a differentiation between using and parking,
Right.
which is not clear here.
yeah,
Okay.
we have nothing right now. So I'm saying there's no
We do
rules.
have something. We have a change of use. And when you're changing the use, you're required to get a permit. So if Bill decides he wants to allow campers to park and stay overnight at Charlie's, he's changing the use of that property, he needs to get a permit for it.
But I've seen plenty of campers come up on Bonnet Street and park in the spaces that are, going one direction or another, going in or out of town. And I know people are staying in there overnight. They pull up, they'll stay inside and they'll leave the next day. I mean, we're gonna say they can't do that anymore if they're passing through town? I mean, people usually,
That's a good question, good question.
yeah.
I think the change of use point that Mike brought up is also a good question, and it has to be looked at relative to the parking versus using and density issues and lot issues. So we have homework to do.
Yeah, I think the on-street parking is a different,
That's already in there as not a cloud, I believe.
you mean in the proposal?
No, in the town plan, I think it's, in the ordinances, I think it's already there.
But I'm saying if you want to restrict overnight people staying on a town highway, that's more like a traffic ordinance than a zoning ordinance.
You know? Alrighty, can we move on? Can we move on? Alrighty, next is the lighting issue. You wanna,
Oh, we got me again?
that's next. Want that?
Good thing I showed up tonight. So this was just.
Sorry, can I start for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I reached out to, Leon a couple of times about how I can help on this project, because being a retailer, and being in the real estate and commercial development business in the past. I think it's an important concept to look at as to how to create more ambiance in the downtown environment. And so we met and talked about it at length and then other issues related. But I'm going to try to help him do it. And if you want some examples for people who are in the audience, Granville does it, correct?
Mhm.
And
That's great.
it really improves things. And it's probably, in my opinion, it's a November through sometime in April issue. And I don't think it goes all night, but it's decorative lighting in the commercial area. And it's also, if you want to go online and look at, say, Larimer Street in Denver, it really looks great. And so that's what we're trying to do, and what we've come up with, and we've talked before, and we have to make progress on this, is to go to the Manchester Business Association and talk to John Burnham about whether they think it's a good idea, and if they do, how we proceed ahead, and how would we get the town to support it. So
Now I have here a little one page that was going to give to the Business Association. And I didn't have time to make copies for you guys, so I apologize, but I'll read it out to you. It's a short little proposal to them. And it says the town of Manchester will handle the initial purchase of the lights to ensure uniformity, installation of the lights, removal and storage of the lights at the end of the lighting season. The businesses within the district will handle initial installation of power receptacles where none are available, power to the LED lighting throughout the season. So that's what the business is responsible for. And LED is very low cost to run. It's like $3 a month, something like that. Now the ordinance itself that I came up with, I will read it best I can here. Downtown Seasonal Lights Ordinance, Section 1, Purpose and Intent. The purpose of this ordinance is to enhance the festive atmosphere and promote a sense of community in the downtown district during the fall and winter season. To achieve this, businesses within the downtown district are required to adorn their gables with white lights, holiday lights. Applicability. This ordinance shall apply to all businesses located within the designated downtown district as outlined in the official town zoning map. Lighting specifications. Businesses subject to this ordinance shall be required to install and illuminate white lights along the gables of their buildings. The white lights must be illuminated no later than September 22nd and shall remain on during the night until April 21st each year. The lights should only be on daily from at least sunset, until midnight. The lights should be maintained in good working order throughout this period. Section 4, Design Guidelines. The use of energy efficient LED lights is encouraged to minimize environmental impact. Lights must edge the roof lines of the building wherever the building is visible from a town street, from Route 7A, 11, or 30, or from any other right-of-way within the town. Lights must be located at least every 6 inches on white wiring. Lights must be warm and toned as specified by the manufacturer. And then exemptions. Businesses facing unique circumstances such as structural challenges or safety concerns may request exemptions from the white light requirement. Exemption requests must be submitted in writing to the town planning department for review. Exemptions may be granted on a case-by-case basis with due consideration given to the nature of the request and its impact on the overall festive atmosphere of the downtown district. Enforcement. The town planning officer shall be responsible for enforcing this ordinance. Businesses found to be in violation of this ordinance may be subject to fines and penalties as determined by the select board. Effective date. Be it further ordained by the Manchester Select Board that this ordinance shall become effective upon adoption. All businesses within the downtown district must comply with the requirements outlined in this ordinance starting from the effective date. And revisions, Manchester Planning Commission reserves the right to review and revise this ordinance as necessary to ensure its continued effectiveness in achieving the stated purpose and intent. Sorry, I have
Comments?
I personally love the idea. I think if we can, just like you said, I think right at the very beginning, or one of you said, if we can figure out a way to work with the Manchester Business Association to make this a more, I was going to say feasible, but to make this easier to implement.
Mhm.
I think it will have a dramatic effect. A significant dramatic effect.
Yeah, on the overall look of
On the overall look, the overall feel. I mean, we have a beautiful town. We have a beautiful downtown. But you are correct. You've said many times, it gets to be a certain time of night. And it just feels kind of empty.
Yeah.
So I think this would have if we can figure out a way to offset the cost, at least the initial cost, which I believe you outlined, it will have a long-term positive impact on the town.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for this work. Appreciate it a great deal. I think it would be best to distribute it to the Planning Commission and to Elias and Peter. And I would propose that we try to make suggestions or whatever edits, alterations that we want to it and talk about it. On that note, and I was going to bring this up later, but here's as good a time as ever. There are a lot of things that I think that we need to get done fairly quickly, and I was wondering if people would be willing to meet more frequently.
Yeah.
Like every other Monday night?
Yeah, it's fine.
Let's try that for a while, because we've gotten issues from the audience that we need to work on and others, and I think that would be helpful. So we're gonna get that distributed and we're gonna go over it, right?
Mhm.
And have our input. Yes, Bill.
I think to help us along, let's say, agree in principle, but I do see some issues about having John, have a meeting tomorrow, but bring this to the MBA and then do a survey with the effective building owners and get a little input before you.
I'm not trying to push it forward. I think that because it won't take place until September anyway, we have a little bit of time to work on it and iron out the kinks.
You'd be surprised at how fast that.
It does.
I think we need to put some revisions in this plan to start with before we present it to the MBA. But yes, as soon as possible, we want to get your input, your advice, et cetera. We'll come with a draft. It may not be exactly that, but it'll be close to it and get your input and hopefully your support.
My concern is gables and getting them up there
Yep.
versus maybe doing something at first floor level. Come down.
Yeah.
That'd be one. And then one of my buildings have got residents who, if it's up under the gables, might object to that light, those lights being on all night, to midnight, which wasn't
Midnight.
clear.
Yeah, till midnight.
Valid points. And not only does it have to be, the paperwork have to be looked at, but then the practicality of it, literally walking up and down the street and talking about it and talking to retailers.
Is that only on the front face of the buildings?
Front face of the buildings, not around the whole building, just in.
Or, yeah, but what if, like, Charlie's main interest is really on the side. Same with.
Just the front, you're not the whole thing.
It's just.
You could, if you want to do the whole thing,
Those are questions that will come up.
Alrighty, moving on the agenda, town plan statement on towers. In the town plan, it addresses the tower issue, but in my opinion, not sufficiently or with the strength that might be helpful in dealing with the issue. And I was going to ask Peter if he could talk to Merrill about that. Sure. Alrighty, unless others have other comments at this time. No, alrighty. We're moving fast on this agenda. We started out slow. STRs. I guess I'm looking for input on this. I know what I'm probably going to hear from somebody in the audience, but I'm of the opinion that we should start by having a registration and start just at that so that we have information. How many short-term rentals are there? Where are they? I think the police needs to know that, the fire and rescue needs to know that, the town needs to know that. I personally don't propose that we should have a fee for this, but just a registration and start with that. And I'm looking for other comments.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to get to the podium on this, please. And I have a handout for you folks, a little research.
Result they're saying.
You have enough? 5, 6, I got plenty.
Keep going with them. I got more.
Need another one? I have it.
I think we're fine, Bill.
Yeah, I will say last weekend, we had, the weekend before last, we had the big snow. I had, the house behind me is an STR and there were 6 cars in the driveway, 4 people per car, 3-bedroom house. I had no number. I had no way to contact anybody to report what was going on. I didn't know how, I asked my neighbor, who we contact, she says, I don't know. You know,
Not good.
and he couldn't tell anybody. There was a big party going on all weekend, 3 days. You know, all those cars were there.
I'm sympathized with that.
But can I just say something? Before we listen. Whatever we're going to hear, I think we need, and I've said this before because this came up before, that we need an inventory of the STRs that exist in Manchester. I don't have any idea how many. There are different types. We don't know what types there are. We don't have any data on this at all.
That's why I can give that to you.
And I would really like to see a working group appointed by you of 1 or 2 members, it has to be 2 members of the planning commission, to develop a plan for getting that kind of information. I think that's really the starting point before we talk about almost anything else, is to get that information.
I think that's what we already started this conversation on, registration. And without cost, because I think if you put a cost associated with it, like the village has, you're not going to get much response.
I'm not talking about dealing with the owners of these properties at this point. I'm talking about getting an inventory of exactly what exists here now.
In order to get that to a degree, you're going to have to know something from the owners. We've got to get some data in place. Gordon doesn't have it all at all. But we need the data in place to determine how many there are, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of the registration process.
That is, well, I guess you could move that way. I'd like to see something done, not just by sending out something and asking people to register, but actually having a formal working group that would put together a plan on which we can move forward and get the information and get the data that we need to make the decisions that need to be made.
Thank you. Bill?
Okay, I appreciate your comments, but that data, let me back up first. I think one of the difficulties is people are reluctant to recognize STRs as lodging that's flying under the radar, just like any other legitimate lodging, such as bed and breakfast, inns, and so on, that comply with all regulations and pay the bill. And I'm not against STRs. I just think they ought to be brought into the same playing field as all these other lodging facilities that play by all the rules that we put on them. The second thing is relative to your recommendation. I did this quick compilation of other towns are quickly recognizing the fact of the impact that STRs are having on their housing. And you're putting your head in the sand and you're talking about housing all the day if you don't believe STRs are depleting our housing stock.
They have been for a while.
Okay. particularly the last 5 years. And it turns out to be a fairly lucrative business. State statistics are verifying that, and that's why it's happening. Because they don't have to play by rules, and it's just a growing aspect of how to make money these days in the hospitality industry. So I think we should, in fairness to all the other legitimate businesses that are playing by the rules, we should recognize STRs as what they are. They're a lodging facility, and put them on the books. Now, I presented what some neighboring communities are doing right now, currently, and what I have on this piece of paper, their ordinances are in place. They are taking a registration fee. They have to do it annually. I wouldn't, and you get your data that way, and it's part of the ordinance. So if they don't do it, they're illegal. So I don't see any reason for taking our time. We've been kicking this around for at least 2-3 years, not having some pretty quick action as a method of how to do it. And it can add at least a dozen other towns to this list if you want to do the research. Identifying the STRs is fairly simple. All you have to do is go on VRBO and look at all the entities in town and find them. And I did that 2 years ago and found at least 70 full-time STRs in Manchester that were former residences. And I'll be glad to present that data to you, redo it, update it, and
Ones since then.
pardon?
There's some new ones since then.
Yeah.
More, yeah.
So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time studying this to death. You know, it needs some action. Yes.
There are, oh, good Lord, sorry. Shut that down.
I'm out.
I think it's a concern that we need to have some fairly quick action on because it's been hanging out too long.
2 years.
And we need to get some information. I've talked to Gordon about it, and he basically doesn't have the level of information that you would think. And he needs to get it. I think the town needs it from an emergency standpoint. The town needs it from sewer usage standpoint. There are a lot of reasons. And I'm not sure I'm in total agreement with your perspective on the cost issue or taxes or other things like that. But maybe so, but we don't know the stuff. And so trying to gather the information is definitely valid. And we've got to do it.
I don't disagree with you. I just think, like we did before, we've got a study and so on, which turned out to be a sham study in my book, and a lot of erroneous information, and it dragged on for 1.5 years before we got the darn thing. This data's out there. It takes a couple of days of concentrated effort to get it, and it can be put together fairly quickly.
I agree.
I'm sorry.
I agree with the issue on the report that I saw. The data that.
I don't want to beat that to death.
It was not worthwhile. We need to get facts on the table so we can figure out how to deal with it.
I'd like to ask a question. As a, you know, we create these zones with different, you know, there's downtown, there's residential. A residential zone, it says in the definition of what it is, it says that it is for families or home, you know, single family homes, people to live or rent. Now, it doesn't anywhere say in there that you can open a corporation in one of those houses and run it as a business, which is most of these in the neighborhoods are all listed as limited liability corporations. So it's by definition a business. And so as a business, it's already not allowed in residential zoning by our rules.
Leon,
Is that, Michael, that be correct?
Well, I believe it's a cheating. People choose to take ownership of parcel as a limited liability company. They may intend to live in it themselves. You know, I could point you to examples of properties that are owned by limited liability companies that are strictly residential, you know, year-round resident, but that's one of the indicia, let's.
Yeah. Because when, the moment that LLC becomes making money, then
Yeah, it depends on the purpose of the LLC.
then it becomes a business. And
Yeah.
as a business, it's subject to different set of rules than a normal home would be.
It's also it's an estate planning device used by some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I asked for the kind of inventory I asked for
Mhm.
is related to that.
Yeah.
There are LLCs, there are homeowners who open their home, rent a room, short-term rental of a room to a couple to stay for a weekend. There are different kinds
And
with
I-
different purposes.
I think that's always been part of Manchester's fabric is.
I'm
you
not
know,
saying,
Yeah.
I'm not making a judgmental comment
Yeah.
here. I'm saying we don't know, as far as I know, we don't know what's what and who's who and where's where. And that's what I think we need to find out.
I think we're all in agreement on that, Leslie. We need data. We need to put data down to determine what the situation is.
So I'm asking for a working group. I'd be happy to be part of it. With one of the other folks here. To actually begin to put together that information.
I'd like to talk to Gordon Black first before doing that because he's in the assessor and he knows all of the properties.
I know Gordon and I'm
And,
aware of that and I would speak with him, of course.
Yeah, but let's go there first and then determine whether it's
Fine.
worthwhile having a small, I think it is probably worthwhile having a small group to focus on.
I just think we ought to, get it done, I guess.
Absolutely.
I think I agree with Bill
Well,
there.
I think
I don't want to beat this to death forever.
we already
But-
have, we
yeah, go
already
ahead,
have, we
Bill.
already have rules in place, as I'm saying. If it's a corporation in a residential neighborhood, it's out of zone. And it's making money, well, it's a business. That is not, that neighborhood is not zoned for businesses.
Yeah, but
So we can right away ban in certain zones, we can ban STRs in certain zones of town immediately based on rules we already have in place. It doesn't.
Well,
Wheel.
I'd like to add something here. I think it doesn't sound like the four of us are in disagreement when
I
it
don't
comes
think
to
so.
figuring out how many there are. But and what they
How
are
they're
and the
different.
types that they are, how different they are, because there is a difference between one person who may be a second homeowner who has completely rented out their home. There is also a difference between someone who is renting out a bedroom. There's also a difference between someone who may have incorporated their business, who may have two homes on their property that they're specifically renting out as significant income. So it sounds like we're all in agreement in terms of the need to gather this information. I do disagree that it's something that we can do quickly, because not everyone who's doing this as a short-term rental is on Airbnb, is on Vrbo. Some people have private websites. I can think of several examples. There are some rentals that would likely qualify as a short-term rental that are being managed by local real estate agencies. So I think when Leslie is recommending that we look at a working group, because I think this is incredibly difficult for us to come up with the details of something and then make a decision on it. But having a working group of, maybe it's not just us, maybe it's a select group of people that includes us as well as other people who can come up with different suggestions on how, 1, 2, 3 different strategies on how we can collect this information. Because I think it's impossible to make a decision on how to move forward without having reliable information, having the real data, and having it segmented in a way that we're not treating someone who's simply renting out a bedroom the same as the Equinox. I don't think to me, that's not That would be the pure definition of equality as opposed to equity. We don't treat someone who is renting out their home as supplemental income the same as we would potentially treat someone who is a second homeowner or someone who has incorporated and owns 2, 3, 4, 5 different homes. So I'm in agreement with Leslie simply because I think that's data that we need, and we need to be able to segment it in a way. And it was clear to me, I think over the last meeting or two, that we did try to reach out to Gordon to get this information, but it sounds like he doesn't have the ability to do that, correct?
He might have the ability, but not the time. He's still involved in the assessing issue, but I think.
That's a better way of putting it.
We're beating around the bush here. We started quite a while ago saying we need data. We need to put data together to understand.
How do you think we
Yes.
should do it?
Brian has a question.
Mr. Chairman, you have no mechanism without a registry. On any given day, somebody can post or unpost a short-term rental. On any given day, a unit could be available to rent for the year, for a month, for a couple days. Unless you have a succinct and unequivocally, concise package that says these are rental units, you will never know what your inventory looks like and who you are speaking to.
I believe that refers to gathering data, doesn't it?
That is the only data you will ever have. You cannot use AirDNA. You cannot just peruse the internet and say, oh, look, I found 400. Okay, if people want to operate as rental or as landlords or as short-term rentals, there shouldn't be any gray area. You want to know, you're not putting a fee on it, that's fine, but you want to know exactly what kind of rental inventory you have and what kind of rental inventory it is.
That's what I call putting together data.
That's the data. So, whether West or anybody else wants to parse it into a room, a house, a lodging property, of which many lodging properties put their inventory, like the Palmer House, on Airbnb, you want to have a defined registry that identifies who says we are renting out space.
Thank you, Brian. We got to keep moving. I think that we understand that we need to assemble data. We have to have more information to figure out what to do. And I'd like to talk to Gordon about it, amongst others. Can we move on?
No,
No.
I need one quick comment, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thomas, I understand what you're saying about all the differentiation between the styles, but our zoning bylaw, when we put the criteria together, it doesn't look at necessarily the differentiation between these economic variables. The zoning bylaw, it says, what is good for this particular area? What should the zoning be? What should the requirements be? And I think trying to parse it out between the one bedroom in the house and versus a whole property, I think that's good information maybe to gather eventually, but it shouldn't be the determining factor of how you treat these. It's lodging, okay? And to what extent is permissible and to what degree is it permissible? And put those kind of parameters around it rather than picking out what he does and what you do and what Mike does.
It's different though, Bill.
Pardon?
It's different.
Well, you put that into a category. You put that into a category.
Has a townhouse and wants to.
You put that into a category rather,
But to categorize, you have to know what you've got. You can't build.
You can create it and you either fall into one or the other.
Okay.
We had
Okay.
this discussion.
Amen.
We're gonna
Thank you.
tell you why we're gonna move on, because we can't address this issue until we know what we're talking about. We have to do that first.
A required registry is what every other town is doing and doing it quickly.
Okay, that's gathering data. That's what I'm talking about. We can't make decisions on this until we have data. So let's stop beating around the bush until we
Let's
do that.
Bill, it's also possible to do that and do a deep dive into what we actually have in town. I mean, one thing doesn't necessarily preclude the other.
Okay, we're gonna move on the agenda. Commission members' input on town plan. Would anybody like to start, or
Oh, God.
I'll start because I think it might surprise you and I think it might help in all of the things we've talked about today. I'm not interested in addressing this. And the reason is not that we don't someday need to improve it and update it, but it's not a plan. And I look at things from a businessman standpoint, and if you wanted to open a new restaurant or a new catalog business or retail business and you went to the bank, first thing they're going to ask you is, show me your business plan. This is not a business plan, this document right here. This is a status report on what the town is. It talks about what this town looks like and what's been done and the status of its existence. It's not a plan at all. We are a planning commission here. And sometimes I think we forget that and we have to start thinking that way. And I'd like to proceed on all the issues we talked about here. We need to meet more frequently to accomplish them. But I'm not interested in this right now because it's not going to change the things that we talked about. It's not going to change the issue of the 29 ordinance issues or the campers or the lighting concept or the STRs. Spending a ton of time, and this could take a ton of time, is not going to have any positive impact on these issues that are in front of us.
I respectfully disagree.
I wouldn't expect anything different. We've got to move ahead. We've got housekeeping to do.
Yeah, we do. And
We can't do this. And this
we-
isn't a high priority because it's not going to change any of this housekeeping really.
This is a vision for the future of this town. And this town needs to think about its future. Because right now, we have problems. We have housing problems. We have economic problems. We have a single economic driver in this town,
Which is what?
tourism.
And we're
It's
not doing a very good
business.
job at it, matter of fact.
Well, that's maybe a whole other story.
Yes,
But the
there are
fact-
other stories, but that's not going to get addressed by looking through this. You read
Yeah.
this book and it's the same as
We
the one in
have-
Shelburne. It's the same as the one in Wilmington or in Stowe or in any resort town.
A good town plan.
Pardon me?
let's see.
A good town plan is a living document, okay? It doesn't get tossed on a shelf. There are good things in that plan. And I have a feeling that very little of them have been realized. There are policies that are being suggested there that have not been implemented as far as I can tell. Secondly, we don't need to do all this ourselves, and we shouldn't. We're not capable of it. But we have a county, we have the BCRC, which is our county and our county agency that does this. We have a town that needs to make input from the different demographic groups. To Bennington has done it, Heinsberg is doing it. All the surrounding towns around here are doing it. And they are becoming more vibrant places because of it and because of what they are doing. We are standing still. We are standing still. We have a grant proposal for for help with developing and creating a town plan. We have ways of getting information, roundtables. I mean, there are a number of things that other places have done that we can do, that we should do, so that we hear from the people in this town as to how they envision this place 5 years, 10 years, perhaps more. There's one town is doing a postcard from 2050 that anybody can turn in terms of their vision for their town. That far in the future, I don't know if I would bother going that far. However,
Okay.
I certainly won't be here.
Can we
But-
move along? We've got
No,
to.
we can't move
Yeah,
along.
we do. We've got very little time left. And what I want to talk about is we have our housekeeping to do. And I'm not saying I disagree with the need to address that
It is
document.
a legal
but it's not-
requirement, Wilbur, that
It's not-
towns
it's not
renew
the-
their
it's
town
not the
plan every
first-
8 years in this
It's not the
state.
first thing, well, that's 8 years. That was
That
2017.
was,
2017, right here. So we've got a little time, but it's not the highest priority right now. We've got housekeeping to do, and we were shown that here today. We have a number of projects that we've got to get responsive to. And I think this has to sit there for
We
a little
need-
while.
we need to get a grant in. We have a very good grant that's been written. I've read it.
Okay, why don't you go talk to Scott Murphy about that?
I will do that. The deadline for the plan is the fall.
Hmm?
I don't have a date, so we have some
For the
time
grant, you mean?
just to get the grant in so that we can actually get the money that we need to hire a consultant from hopefully BCRC to help us put this together, to develop the mechanisms that we need to put it together so that we have something that is viable, that is living, that will move us forward into the future for the next 5-10 years. We need that.
Why
I'm
don't
sorry,
you,
we
why don't
need
you go
that.
talk to Scott about the timing and the plans for that?
I will talk to Scott, I will talk to
Yes.
Gordon. I will
Paul Carocchio has his hand raised.
people about
Paul,
it.
would you like to speak?
Just real quickly, I don't know if this is, I'm sorry, I can't virtually be at the podium, but I'm virtual. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Leslie, I could not agree more with you. We've not met in person, but I do believe the town plan does need a revision, but I do also believe there's a lot to do at the planning commission level that needs to be chewed up every week or every bi-week. But one thing I'd like to comment and for you to consider is to not use the BCRC as your consultant to do the town plan. Maybe go a little progressive and not use our regional commission and actually go out and get a bid from another consultant who isn't just giving us a cookie cutter plan that the state wants us to do.
I understand what you're saying. I think that what we do needs to come from our population. And I think the BCRC needs to facilitate that, not create it for us. So I don't have any problem. I know people at the BCRC. And I'm not talking about Janet, who everybody is talking about.
I do have a question. And I'm not disagreeing with you, Wilbur, or you. I agree with both of you. I think that there are housekeeping items, but the town plan is important because it should guide the decisions that we make, not only as a planning commission, but for the select board. And plan is literally in the document's name. So
Say that again?
the word plan is literally in the document's title. We are the planning commission. But my question, and this is for all four of us, and just generally, I've heard a lot of very negative feedback from some people about the BCRC. What is it in particular about the BCRC that we seem to have a problem with? Is it the organization as a whole? Is it a particular person?
I don't think I can answer that. I have not worked with BCRC. I know Janet. I know a couple of other people down there. I don't consider this a plan from a standpoint of a businessman's
I agree.
plan. This is, what we need is a plan. Where are we going? Yes,
Heidi has her.
I'll be here in a minute. Where are we, where are we going, and how are we going to get there? That to me is a plan. And this is a status report, talks about wonderful things. It has some good points. It shows things that have been accomplished and things that haven't. But I'd like to focus more on the business plan of what we've got to do, where we want to be, and how we're going to achieve it, and when it's going to get done. Heidi, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I can't be there in person. But going back a couple of meetings, I think I was there and I think Greg Cutler was there, but the select board has really been trying to encourage the planning commission to not use the BCRC. We're not supportive of reapplying for that grant. We'd really like the planning commission to tackle this. And I think that when we had our initial meetings with all of you, we were pretty clear that this was something that we wanted to sort of tackle within our community, getting feedback from members of the community and not using an external consultant like the BCRC.
Heidi, I don't believe that we have the expertise to do this. I am not a planner. We do not have a planner, as you know. And we should have a senior planner guiding this process. This is not it's not a simple undertaking.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
you need someone who is professionally credentialed to lead something like this and do it properly so that it has significance, it has meaning, and it has use in the future.
Well, I
Thank you,
guess
Heidi.
your suggestion earlier about engaging with the community is something that I would pursue rather than the BCRC.
Thank you, Heidi.
You do
Bill.
both.
Yes.
It's like the back up a little bit. Most of the community, if you ask them, I don't know if they can tell you or tell you too much about the town plan. So, and one thing is maybe have it disseminated a little bit or people look at it first. Here's what people live by, which is generated from the town plan, is the zoning bylaws. When I want to do anything in town or anybody else who's trying to do anything, they go to the zoning bylaw. Pretty good bylaw from my perspective, but the town plan is how all this was formed. So what are our issues with the town plan? Let's focus on that. What's wrong about it and what may we need to change? And that's probably would come best from community discussion. And then if we start saying we need to redraw this and this, let's get some professional help. But I think from experience in the past, and having been on the planning commission, there are other options than the BCRC that we ought to look into.
Thank you.
Do you know what those options would be? Besides just,
Well, there's other professional planners, there's people that work with educational institutions that provide those types of services. Let's check with other.
Why would we? Why would we do that when we have a regional planning office that has.
Be very careful here, but I think the issue is probably it would be best that we have some distance to look at things afresh. Without the influence of people who have just been involved with this for so long.
I appreciate your input as the first of the town to make comments on how we can improve the plan. I think they're valid too. And Paul, I thank you because of your experience in this area. And I think we should pay attention to that. And Heidi is representing the select board and I know that they feel that way, that maybe we can find better help to do this. So we are running past our time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Wilbur, so I just want to know the status of where we stand with those 5 items. It seemed there was more discussion on tonight.
Yeah.
So
More discussion, and we're gonna meet in 2 weeks.
So we're gonna hold on those 5, okay.
So we're
Okay?
gonna vote to move the 24 remaining forward to the select board, leave the 5 to the side.
Right now?
did we already vote on that?
I don't know, is that the intent?
3-4 meetings ago, I thought. Okay, yeah, let's vote on it again.
Are we gonna vote on that again, Peter?
No, I'm asking if you want to send the 24 that you approved forward to the select board.
Well, there's a problem here because there's some of us whose position is we've already done that.
I agree.
We did already do that.
You voted to approve.
Yeah.
I don't know if you voted.
There wasn't a vote to send it to the select board. There was a,
Before you got here.
Why
Then
don't
we
we,
can do it again.
Why don't
I
we
think
just
that's
vote again?
terminology, that's diction there as to, we thought we were approving meant sending it to the select board. But you
Fair
want us
enough.
to do it again.
Fair enough. If you think that that's done, then we're gonna make sure the select board has this on their next agenda item, the next opening.
All righty, do we have consensus on this?
yes.
Does that include 29, number 29?
I
No,
don't
we're
think
going to
so.
review number 29.
We have already voted to approve
Did
it.
vote.
I know that, but people have brought up the point that we think there are mistakes in what we've done and we've got to take a look.
And I respect that, but we have already voted on it. So does that require that we vote again?
I think it requires that we might have to amend that ordinance when we find if we've made mistakes in what representation has been given.
But to clarify, we have already approved it and sent it back to the select board.
I believe that's right, even though it may be wrong.
So I just want to be very clear. At the next select board meeting is tomorrow. At the select board meeting following that, number 29, this zoning change will be presented to the select board
I don't,
for either approval or not.
But we did vote on it, so they would be obliged to vote on it tomorrow.
I just want to clarify because that should have happened a month, maybe 2 months ago.
I thought it did too.
It did.
But they did not review it.
Let's ask tomorrow.
Okay.
Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll make a motion, is what you're saying?
Mhm.
In a second,
I second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So you're saying that 24 plus 29 is going to the select board.
That's my understanding.
right, so am I good to end this meeting?
Recording stopped.